Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. Good. My name is Kevin. I use he, him, his pronouns, and today I'll be talking a little bit about some self-regulation, co-regulation related to our nervous system. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to share with you all a little exercise that you might try on your own after this little time that we have together here today. And I'll also put my email address up there. Part of the fun of this exercise can be sharing about how it goes with each other. So maybe we'll have an opportunity to do that later on if you try that. So yeah, welcome. Also, just an invitation to everyone for this little bit of time here, acknowledging the existence of some Zoom fatigue and how it can feel to be seated staring at the computer here. As I'm doing now, I invite you to not have to stare at the screen the whole time. If it feels good to look around or stand up and move, following your impulse towards comfort here for this time that we're together. Good. Okay, I'll begin here. I'll come back and forth in terms of being on your screen and looking at the slides here. So, good. So, beginning here with just a little overview. You'll note at the end of this presentation, I've noted the sources for the material here. This overview of the organizing principles of polyvagal theory comes from Deb Dana's book, which is cited at the end here. This feels like such a great time to be alive in terms of how nervous system understanding is expanding and informing so many therapeutic practices and somatic practices, even that are being moved well outside the realms of traditional sort of therapeutic settings, just into our lives broadly and the containers of work that many people are doing in a variety of areas now. So Deb Dana has taken some of Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory and making it more approachable for clinicians and all of us. So just a quick overview here. The three organizing principles of polyvagal theory. The first is that it's an autonomic hierarchy. So we have three parts. Through this lens, we view the autonomic nervous system, three parts, each with its own set of protective actions. The earliest dorsal vagal system, this is the traditionally sort of freeze immobilization. This is a specific branch of the vagus nerve and other associational networks that are employed in a case of overwhelm. And this one goes back about 500 million years to a little prehistoric fish. It's easy to remember dorsal vagal that way when you think of the fish. And also, I don't know, I always think of some like Finding Nemo scenario where some fish suddenly realize, hey, hold still and we'll survive. So that's dorsal vagal. Sympathetic system, fight and flight. This is goes back about 400 million years. The earliest sort of fossil record here is a prehistoric fish. Don't remember the name of that fish, but one interesting thing is that it was the first vertebrate we know about to have a jawbone, which makes me always think about some interesting connections between fight and flight and jaw stuff, jaw tension even in us. And the most recent is the ventral vagal system, and that is where we have social connection, social engagement. This branch of the vagus nerve is sort of from the brain and runs down behind the carotid arteries and innervates in the front here. It's the stuff all above the diaphragm. And this is kind of the main thing I wanted to just bookmark for us at this point is ventral vagal's relationship to safety through connection and social engagement. Second principle of polyvagal theory is neuroception. This is taking in input into the nervous system. The third principle, co-regulation. And this is another essential adaptation for survival. So I've underlined one aspect here from Deb Dana's articulation of this. The ability to self-regulate is built on ongoing experiences of co-regulation. So through co-regulation, we connect with others and create a shared sense of safety. And for some of us, this earliest experience of being with a safe person in a safe place is missing or was very limited. And it's through these patterns of co-regulation that we learn how to self-regulate. What I'm doing here is a little survey of a few sources related perhaps to this final exercise that we're moving towards. And I just couldn't resist throwing in a quote here from Babette Rothschild, which you can see here. So there's a critical misperception that to recover from trauma, you must feel worse before you can feel better. Common sense requires improving quality of life to be the primary goal. And this is just a thing I love about her and her writings so much, is this sense of clarity and commitment to tracking for folks and sharing with folks in trauma recovery that, yeah, there's a way to do this that doesn't have to feel worse. Feeling better is better. Okay, here's a couple of interesting things that come out of a book, a fairly recent book by Johann Hari called Lost Connections. And Brett Ford is a social scientist up at Berkeley who did an interesting study I'm going to share a little bit with you about now. This quote from her kind of sums up what they found. The more you think happiness is a social thing, the better off you are. So the question that Brett Ford and her colleagues were looking into was this one that I've written here on the bottom. So does trying consciously to make yourself happier actually work? So if you decided today to dedicate more of your life to deliberately seeking out happiness, would you actually be happier a week from now or a year from now? Come back into view here. Here we go. So this was some interesting stuff here. So the study followed. They looked at thousands of people, and in the books that I've referenced here, you can see the annotations around the papers and the size and methodology of the studies. And what Brett Ford and her colleagues were looking at this question, so they followed thousands of people, and they looked at 4 groups. They looked at folks in the U.S., in Russia, in Japan, and in Taiwan. And they found that if you set about consciously trying to make yourself happier, you would not become happier if you lived in the U.S. So the folks in the other countries had qualitative, long-lasting improvement to their overall happiness. So they began exploring why this might be. So in essence, it comes down to, I suppose, a different way of viewing what happiness is. So for example, if you show a photo to the various groups, a photo of a person standing in front of a crowd speaking, and ask them to describe it. Folks in the U.S. generally described the person at the front of the crowd speaking in great detail. And then the description of the crowd was sort of a minor note in their description. Folks in the other countries, conversely, described the crowd in great detail, and the person speaking was a minor point of the description. Another example was a photo of a young girl smiling in the middle of the photo, surrounded by a bunch of other children who were not. When asked to describe the photo, the question was, is this girl in the middle happy? And the folks in the US described the girl as being happy, like obviously she's smiling. Folks in the other countries said, no, she's not happy. How could she be, right? She's surrounded by a sea of distress. How could one be happy? So these couple examples sort of illustrate the differences in how culture impacts how we conceive of happiness. And when they then looked at what folks did to improve their happiness, they found that the folks in the US did, frankly, what I would have done if given an opportunity and maybe a budget to improve my happiness, went and did things for themselves. So like, yeah, I'm going to do a bunch of yoga and going to buy that motorcycle I always wanted to get and going to eat really good food. And whereas the folks in the other countries did things that improved the folks around them. So there was a service element involved, but their inherent notion was to turn towards improving the happiness of others. So the good news is that it's not because a person lives in the US. It has to do with how we conceive of happiness. So just bookmarking this, again, as we're leading towards this experiential piece at the end, to name the influence of culture and the fact that a more collectivist version of what it means to be happy actually has quantifiable results in improving one's well-being. There we go. Okay, so the next few slides, I'm going to outline exercise, experiential piece here that I first did in organic intelligence training based around nervous system work, and which I've done many times since then in various spaces, and always a pretty interesting thing in terms of in terms of a lot of things. So I'm going to try and kind of resist my inclination to describe a bunch about what might be your experience doing this, and instead just frame it for y'all. And maybe if you do this later, I would love to have some interaction with you if you care to do that. Maybe if we have some way to do a group chat kind of thing where this video is posted even, where we can share with each other. I think this is a COVID-safe exercise because it's easily done outside, which is nice, and can be done in a socially distanced way, and involves just you and one partner to do it with. In the event that going outside isn't an option, there might be ways, there are ways that one could do this over the phone or FaceTime with a partner. If you're interested in exploring that more, please let me know. I'd be glad to talk to you about that. Okay, so we'll go through the co-enjoyment exercise now. So here's the framework. The first thing is to choose a partner. Second thing is to choose a location. Outdoors can be nice. And if the weather where you are is such that you don't want to go outside, it can be done inside as well. Third step is to set an amount of time. Here I'm offering the notion that maybe an hour or so would be good. Personally, I've done this co-enjoyment exercise in even a longer span where it's for 45 minutes one way and then 45 minutes the other way. Here I've outlined two 20-minute segments. And then what we do is we choose a role, either enjoyer or co-enjoyer. And you'll have one of those roles, your partner will have the other role, and you'll go do this for 20 minutes. Then pause for a bit and then switch roles. And when you've completed that, then sharing about the experience can be interesting and a fun thing to do. Okay, for the enjoyer, your job is simply to enjoy yourself. It's a radical invitation. Take a little time and enjoy yourself. Uh, so the invitation here might include any of these, like following your impulse towards what is pleasing. So stuff that's safe, stuff that's not too intense. Uh, for some reason, I've noticed here uh, at Sierra Tucson, going outside with groups of folks to do this. Many people haven't seen cactus before, so following an impulse towards enjoying the cactus often leads people to come close to the cactus. And for some reason, there is this impulse in us where we want to touch a cactus. I have consistently seen one or two people in groups who just can't resist. And I have to say, I know that feeling. When I saw cactus for the first time, something about those little thorns you want to know. Yeah, are they flexible or are they firm? Just how sharp are they? So I did make a little note here that following your impulse, safe stuff and maybe stuff that's not too intense. So the invitation here is to experience your enjoyment really with just a sense of ease. And if some kind of curiosity or interest or enjoyment shows up, just go in with that, whatever it looks like. Sometimes it's looking at things. Sometimes it's listening. Maybe there's some bird song or water running or something that's appealing through the audio channel there. Perhaps it's movement. Sometimes it's walking or skipping or moving your body around, even getting earth under the feet and kind of feeling that and hearing what it sounds like. So whatever it looks like, the invitation is to take your time and enjoy yourself. And this last one is kind of connoisseurship of enjoyment here. If this is a thing that you notice, that's cool. If not, no biggie. But just there's even potential for noticing in your own system when it feels like you're moving towards things to enjoy and when those things are simply coming to you. If I failed to note this earlier, this exercise is done in silence. So once you decide on your role and the amount of time, then the invitation is to do that in silence. Coenjoyer. Your job is to co-enjoy. So often in framing this exercise, we leave a lot of room for what that means. And when we reconvene as a group and talk about this, it's interesting to see how this shows up for folks. Here I've given you a little bit of structure around it, but your job is simply to enjoy your partner's enjoyment. So the connoisseurship level here, number 2, is maybe even noticing as you're co-enjoying what it is like when you're enjoying what the other person is enjoying. So perhaps you're noticing with some specificity what appears to be the source of their enjoyment, and then you're enjoying that also. As distinct maybe, or overlapping with, but anyway, a little different from when you're co-enjoying simply that they are enjoying something. And the one kind of role, one task that the co-enjoyer role has here is you're the timekeeper. So the enjoyer doesn't need to track time. And if you've decided on 20 minutes, for example, then when that amount of time is up, you say, let's switch roles. And at that time, you can pause briefly if you'd like to, and share some observations, whatever feels good. And then you switch roles and begin the second 20-minute segment. And then as you get together afterwards, I've thrown out some potential discussion points here, but there's no right or wrong way to do this. It really is an invitation to take a little time and notice how it feels in terms of both enjoying and co-enjoying, and even the impact of silence on that and what shows up. Again, I'm going to refrain from talking a lot about what can show up and making explicit connections to the nervous system, and just invite you all to check this out on your own. And I really hope that we have ability to have some exchange around it if that feels good to you. So once you've both had a chance to be in one or other of the roles, and you're sitting and reflecting on this experience, some things that you might consider. The first is just how you feel overall as compared to before you began the exercise. Second one here is maybe you noticed a preference between one or the other of the roles. Maybe it felt different being the enjoyer or the co-enjoyer. And if so, maybe paying a little more attention here to what was enjoyable about your preferred role. Third one here has to do with the silence, what one might notice related to doing this in silence. And the fourth one, just kind of broadly, anything else you noticed, including how it felt being in the relational field with another person doing this, and possibly anything about your own enjoyment as it sort of oscillates between feeling really connected in the relational field and then maybe some sense of differentiation where you're enjoying or co-enjoying and feeling embodied in your own system and less sort of connected in the relational field. Here's a list of the sources for the things mentioned here in this little PowerPoint. And I'm going to put there's my email address, and I'll check in and take some questions here, hoping that the co-enjoyment exercise was described clearly enough and that it might appeal to you and might be something you're interested in doing. Good. Okay. So looking at the questions here, yes, agree with Brett Ford. Attitude is everything. Indeed. Yeah, cool family exercise, right? It says co-enjoyment experience could be great for the family. Fair enough. That would be super cool, and I have done that myself, and I know others who have. Lovely. I hope you're able to try that with the family. That sounds great. Question, is this a type of grounding exercise too? Yeah, interesting to see what shows up. And I'll just sort of say that it is pretty reliable that a number of folks will report feeling more calm and more grounded after doing this, while also recognizing that for some folks, it can be challenging. The aspect of doing it in silence and even between the different roles, some sense of responsibility and stuff like that can be a little activating. But overall, particularly when done outdoors, it seems like a grounding aspect certainly comes through. Yeah, good. We still have a few minutes here. So the question is around clarifying how co-enjoyment relates to the polyvagal theory and the implications for therapists working with clients. Yeah, so the cycles of experience in this co-enjoyment exercise can include really all three of those states. A person might experience some dorsal vagal, some sympathetic, and some ventral vagal. The hope is that this container provides enough of a span of time and enough of a sense of safety that a person's system could reach some ventral vagal state, at least for some of the time. And on that note, Stephen Porges was recently did an interview with Rick Hansen from Buddha's Brain, and Rick Hansen's son. Can't remember the podcast, but be glad to send y'all a link if you're interested. And Stephen Porges had a line in there about that cues of safety are functional innervators of the vagus nerve, right? And particularly this part, up at the top that's referred to as the vagal brake, and how that influences heart rate and heart rate variability. So broadly, to answer this, the co-enjoyment exercise may provide an opportunity to transition between states, and even perhaps to land in some ventral vagal that a person can enjoy for a while. Question, what were the 3 other countries? Yeah, it was Russia, Japan, and Taiwan. And that's in Johan Hari's book. And if you're interested in that book, I highly recommend the audiobook. He's a real pleasure to listen to him read his own stuff. There's some good humor in it. And it's a book that starts out seeming like it's about one thing and then kind of becomes about everything. So it's lovely. Back to the resources slide. Yep, you betcha. I'll toggle back to the resources slide so that you can take down those names. Good. Feels much like a mindfulness activity. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, yeah. And that's one of the lovely things about Babette Rothschild's book, that 8 Keys to Trauma Recovery, is her emphasis on the bringing mindful awareness to our to what's going on really in our nervous system. And I think that both Deb Dana and Babette Rothschild have this really lovely, their foregrounding sort of agency for clients in like befriending their nervous system and developing a relationship with it. So the mindfulness aspect comes really even to this sensing in ourselves what's going on while we're doing this co-enjoyment exercise. Do gratitude and savoring play a part in this approach? Yeah, I using for sure the savoring word is one that I use a lot here. I was alluding to with this connoisseurship thing. It's one of my favorite things about this stuff is that we're feeling into these different aspects of enjoyment, like what rich terrain it is, and what a privilege it is to get to have perhaps the time and capacity, to develop this faculty for savoring the things that feel good. Interested in the link to the podcast? Okay, good. Going to make a note of that. I see that we're approaching time here. I'll come back on for a moment. Good. Thanks everyone for attending. I hope that you have a fun experience with the co-enjoyment exercise, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.